Everyone froze. My Aunt Stephanie's eyes darted between me and my father. Her husband Todd awkwardly sipped his wine. The Christmas ham sat untouched in the center of the table like some glittering prop in a play gone wrong. I could barely hear the carols from the stereo over the rushing of blood in my ears. My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 33. I had been living in my childhood home in Boulder, Colorado for the past 13 months. What was supposed to be a short-term move to help my dad after my mom passed away had morphed into something far more painful and humiliating than I could have ever predicted. When my mom, Margaret, died from an unexpected aneurysm the previous fall, my dad, Greg Carter, had fallen into a kind of quiet chaos. The bills piled up. The mailboxes overflowed. So, like any decent daughter, I hit pause on my life in Portland, moved back home, and quietly kept the wheels of his life turning. He never asked for help, not directly. But the cracks were there. So I helped. Financially. Each month, I wired over $3,300 from my remote consulting work into the house, the mortgage, electric, gas, Wi-Fi, property insurance. All in my name. Also, he wouldn't drown. He never thanked me. And now, on Christmas Day, in front of extended family, he called me a parasite. You just sit on that laptop, pretending you're some hotshot, Greg continued, his face flushing crimson. You're 33. No husband. No job that anyone understands. You've freeloaded long enough. I blinked. My aunt opened her mouth, probably to say something neutral like let's eat, but she stopped. Todd glanced at the gravy boat like it might offer him cover. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Because this wasn't about the insult, it was about the realization that he meant it. He had waited until all the December bills were paid, until I'd used my business earnings to make sure Christmas was warm, clean, and filled with gifts. Then, he chose to annihilate me at the table. Calculated. Cruel. Controlled. What he didn't know, and what no one at the table could have guessed, was how badly he had miscalculated me. This Christmas dinner would be the last time I would ever spend my energy, money, or time keeping a man afloat who called his daughter a burden. The moment was rupturing something inside me, and I didn't know it then, but it would lead to consequences he never saw coming. I hadn't always been this emotionally detached. When Mom passed, I grieved hard. I'd always been closer to her than to Greg. She was the one who handled all the bank stuff, taxes, online accounts, and the passwords to just about everything. 2 weeks after the funeral, I found Greg hunched over the kitchen table surrounded by stacks of unopened envelopes. Bills. Threats. Overdraft notices. His voice was hoarse when he told me, "I'll figure it out, Em. I don't need a babysitter." But he did. His pension barely covered his prescriptions. His Social Security went straight to groceries. I did the math. The mortgage alone was $2,900 per month. Add heat, electric, water, internet, and he was underwater before the month even began. So, I stayed. Gave up my lease in Portland. Moved into my old room, still pale blue with glow-in-the-dark stars I couldn't bring myself to peel off the ceiling. I turned his Comcast and utilities into my name, so I could manage payment dates more efficiently. I told myself it was temporary. Greg told himself he was being generous. You can stay here while you get back on your feet, he'd said, like he was extending some grand favor. I didn't correct him. It didn't take long to realize he needed the fantasy that he was the one helping me. By December, my remote consulting firm was thriving. I had 5 consistent clients and a new retainer contract with a logistics startup in Seattle. I was making over $6,000 a month, solid money for someone whose commute was a staircase and a hoodie. But none of that mattered to Greg. He saw a daughter tapping keys at odd hours, not in a cubicle, and therefore, unemployed. He'd complained to his friends at the diner about how his lazy daughter was still living at home. I overheard him once on the phone saying, "I don't know what she even does. Pretends to be some digital business wizard or something." I swallowed it all. Every eye roll. Every passive-aggressive comment. Because I believed, naively, that family was above accounting. But Greg was keeping his own kind of ledger. And the only entry next to my name was debt. So on Christmas, when he decided to balance the books in front of everyone, something broke inside me. "I want you out of my house tonight," Greg finally declared, stabbing his finger in the air. "I've had enough." Aunt Stephanie gasped. Todd cleared his throat. But I was already pushing back from the table, the legs of my chair scraping across the hardwood. "You're absolutely right," I said, my voice calm, eerily calm. "I'll be out within the hour." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. That seemed to unsettle him more than a meltdown would have. "Don't come crawling back when reality hits you," he snapped as I turned away. I paused, looked over my shoulder. "Don't worry. You're about to experience your reality." I packed fast, laptop, clothes, files. 14 months of sacrifice fit into a single suitcase. I booked a room at the Marriott near Denver International and drove off without looking back. And in that sterile hotel room, I opened my laptop and pulled up every account linked to Greg's address. Electric, gas, insurance, mortgage, auto payments. By morning, all of them would be cancelled. He had wanted me gone. Now, he'd see what that actually meant. The Marriott room was nothing fancy: beige walls, a humming mini fridge, and a bed that felt too wide after sleeping on a twin-size mattress in my childhood bedroom for over a year. I sat cross-legged in sweatpants, laptop open, the soft blue glow of the screen casting long shadows. First, the mortgage. I dialed the bank. "Hi, this is Emily Carter. I'm calling regarding mortgage account number 0712 to 6687 for the property at 114, Juniper Lane. I'd like to cancel the auto payment and remove my payment authorization effective immediately." The woman on the other end confirmed it with polite efficiency. I wondered if she could hear the tension in my voice, the tremble beneath my practiced calm. Next came utilities. "Denver Energy, this is Emily Carter. I'm the account holder for 114, Juniper Lane. I'd like to close the electric account effective tomorrow, December 26th. Then gas, water, internet, trash service, homeowners insurance." Bit by bit, I unwound every invisible string that had held Greg's life together for the past year. Greg's name wasn't on any of the accounts, not because I wanted control, but because his credit score hovered somewhere around the number of calories in a granola bar. He couldn't qualify for decent rates. So I had taken the financial hit. The responsibility. The stress. Quietly. Now it was his turn. I staggered the disconnections strategically. Electricity would go first, followed by gas and water. By December 29th, he would be sitting in a dark, cold house with no heat, no Wi-Fi, and no clue how to fix it. I wasn't doing it to punish him. I was doing it to clarify. He had called me a parasite. Now he would get to see what life looked like without that parasite paying his bills. As I closed my laptop, a text from Aunt Stephanie lit up my phone. "Emily, are you okay?" That was a lot. "I didn't know your father felt that way." I stared at the message. The thing was, he didn't. Not entirely. His actions weren't born of truth. They were born of pride. His fragile masculinity couldn't handle being dependent on the daughter he used to carry on his shoulders through 4th of July parades. Now I was the one carrying him, and that reversal made him bitter. "Still," I replied. "I'm okay. I just need some space." She didn't press. The morning after Christmas, I checked out of the hotel and found a cozy co-working cafe in downtown Boulder. The scent of espresso, soft jazz, and warm chatter wrapped around me like a blanket. By 10 a.m., my phone was vibrating non-stop. 4 missed calls from Greg. Then came the text. "Greg, Dad power's out. Electric Co. says the account was closed. Did you do something?" I didn't reply. At 11:07, Aunt Stephanie called. "Emily," she said gently. "Your dad's in a panic. The electricity's out. He can't figure out what's going on. Maybe he should check with the utility company, I said, sipping my latte. There was a pause. Emily, did you? I didn't answer directly. Stephanie, for 13 months, I've been covering every single one of his bills. He kicked me out after Christmas dinner. He called me a parasite. What would you have done? Her silence was answer enough. By noon, Greg was calling every 15 minutes. I let them ring. He had built his narrative so well. Emily, the freeloading daughter, living under his roof, mooching off his pension. But his version of the story didn't align with his mortgage due January 1st. When I finally answered around 1:30 p.m., his voice was manic. Emily, what the hell is going on? I can't get anyone on the phone. The power's off. The gas company said the account holder cancelled service. I closed my account, I said plainly. When I moved out. Like you told me to. You can't do that. This is my house. And those were my accounts. The silence stretched so long, I could hear his shaky breath. You've left me without power in the middle of winter. You know I'm on meds that need refrigeration. You probably should have thought of that before you called me a leech in front of your family, I said. Or maybe before you relied on someone whose job you claimed wasn't real. He stammered. You've been living rent-free for over a year. I laughed. It wasn't bitter. It was incredulous. Greg, I paid every mortgage, every utility, every insurance premium. You paid for cereal and laundry detergent. If that's your definition of support, you've got bigger problems than a dark house. His voice fell flat. I didn't know. I didn't ask you to. No, you didn't. Because you didn't want to know. You preferred pretending you were the provider. That made it easier to insult me without guilt. Emily. I hung up. I didn't owe him an explanation. I owed myself a clean break. That evening, I reviewed the last 14 months of payments. Over $45,000 gone. Quietly, without recognition. I wasn't angry about the money. I was angry that it meant nothing to him. That all he saw was an unmarried daughter typing on a MacBook, and not the woman who had kept his roof intact when he was too shattered to do it himself. The next day, December 27th, Boulder got hit with a deep freeze. Temperatures dropped into the low teens. I curled up in my Airbnb with a hot cocoa, finally able to relax. Around 8 a.m., Greg called again. His voice was different now. Quieter. Strained. The gas is off, he said. The house is freezing. I called the company. They want a $400 deposit I don't have. They won't budge without proof of income. Emily, I need your help. And there it was. Not rage. Not accusation. Need. But I was done being needed by someone who saw me as disposable. You wanted independence, Dad. Congratulations, I said. He was silent for a beat. I didn't mean it. That stuff I said. I was angry. I didn't mean it. Yes, you did, I whispered. You meant all of it. The worst part wasn't the betrayal, it was the slow unraveling of my illusions. I had spent months telling myself that Greg just didn't know how to show gratitude. That he was grieving. That he'd eventually acknowledge my role in keeping his life afloat. But that phone call on December 27th, the one where he admitted he had no heat and no money to fix it, tore away the last of my denial. He was never going to change. Emily, he pleaded over the line, I'm not asking for a handout. I just need a little help getting the gas turned back on. I stirred my coffee slowly, letting the silence press in. You know what's funny? I finally said. For 14 months, I helped you keep that house warm. Never once complained. Never once asked for anything back. But the second I stopped enabling you, you're suddenly aware of what things cost. He was quiet. The gas company wants a $400 deposit, Greg, I continued. And proof of income. Do you even know what your retirement checks cover without me? I can't survive on $1,800 a month, he snapped. Suddenly defensive. You know that. I let that hang in the air for a moment. Then how did you think the mortgage was getting paid? I asked quietly. How did you think the lights stayed on? The Wi-Fi? Your prescriptions being delivered on time? Who did you think was handling all of that? His voice cracked. I didn't ask you to. No, you didn't, I agreed. Because that would have meant admitting you weren't the provider anymore. And that terrified you more than losing the house. There was a long, ragged breath on the other end. I could picture him sitting in the kitchen, wrapped in his worn flannel robe, maybe still wearing the slippers I bought him last year. You've made your point, he muttered. No, I said. I haven't. December 28th. I didn't answer any of his calls. My voicemail filled with increasingly desperate messages. The water's off now. I can't even flush the toilet. Emily, this is inhumane. I called the mortgage company. They said I'm already behind. I thought you said, Emily, we had an agreement. I don't understand how this happened. What did you do? It was surreal. He still didn't understand. He hadn't grasped that he'd never paid for that roof. That he hadn't made a single mortgage payment in over a year. That I had shielded him from foreclosure, from debt collectors, from a spiral he wasn't emotionally or financially prepared for. And still, I was the villain in his mind. I ignored the messages. Booked myself a massage. Had sushi with an old friend from college who happened to be in town. Laughed harder than I had in months. Because somewhere between his insults and my silence, I had started to breathe again. On the morning of December 29th, I heard a knock on the door of my Airbnb. Through the peephole, I saw him, Greg. Hat in hand, quite literally, holding his faded baseball cap against his chest like a war widow at a memorial. I opened the door slowly. He looked small. Not physically, but energetically. There was no fire in him. Just cold. I need to talk, he said. I didn't invite him in. Just stepped outside and closed the door behind me. He glanced at my coatless arms. Aren't you cold? I can afford heating, I said. You. That stung. I saw it hit. He ran a hand through his graying hair. I messed up. I waited. I shouldn't have said those things. I know what I did. I was wrong. And, he faltered. And I need you to come back. Just for a while. Until I get back on my feet. I laughed, not cruelly. Just, stunned. Greg. You've been on my feet for over a year. He looked down, ashamed. I didn't know how bad things had gotten. Margaret always took care of everything. After she died, I guess I shut down. You didn't just shut down, I said. You blamed me for keeping the lights on. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, I snapped. You wanted to play the martyr. The old man stuck with his freeloading daughter. You let the narrative protect your ego while I paid your damn mortgage. He lowered himself onto the porch step, shivering slightly. I'm sorry. It wasn't enough. I crouched next to him. Do you know what it feels like to be called a parasite in front of your family? After wiring $3,000 into someone's account so they don't lose their house? His eyes glistened. No. I hope you never do. We sat there in silence for a while. Cars passed in the distance. Somewhere, someone was shoveling snow. The world continued, indifferent to our collapse. Finally, he said it. The one thing I never thought I'd hear from Greg Carter. I can't live like this. I need your help. I stood. No. What you need is to live with this. For once. He blinked. What does that mean? It means I'm not coming back. Not to fix things. Not to make them easier. Not to rescue a man who mistook love for weakness. His face crumpled. So what? That's it. No, I said. It's a beginning. Just not the one you expected. I turned and went inside. This time, I didn't cry. Greg didn't come back to the Airbnb after that day. For the next 2 days, My phone fell mostly silent, an eerie calm after a week of voicemails that bounced between blame and desperation. I thought maybe he'd finally accepted it. That I wasn't coming back. That he had to figure it out on his own. Then, on December 31st, New Year's Eve, my phone rang just after 10 a.m. It wasn't Greg. It was Aunt Stephanie. "Emily," she said cautiously. "I just got off the phone with your father. He's in trouble." I didn't respond. He called me asking if I had a space heater. Said the house has been freezing. He sounds worn out. Different. I asked if he'd been to the mortgage office yet, and he started crying. She paused, waiting for my reaction. I gave none. "I know he was wrong. I know what he said to you was unforgivable. But he's still your father, sweetheart." That word, still, hung between us like an uninvited guest. "I need to ask you something," I said, my voice steady. "Has he told you who's been paying the bills this past year?" There was a moment of hesitation. "No," she admitted. "He always made it sound like he had things under control. He didn't." "I did." I could hear her shift in her seat. "Are you saying I paid everything? Mortgage, utilities, insurance, internet, you name it. Over $45,000 total. Out of my own income." Quietly. He never asked questions, just let me handle it all. Then turned around and called me a parasite in front of the entire family. Stephanie didn't speak. "And now," I added, "he wants the same daughter he threw out to fix his mess. Again." "Oh, Emily. Tell me something, Stephanie. If Todd humiliated you in front of your kids, then came crawling back a week later asking for money, what would you do?" There was no answer. Because she knew. That night, as fireworks cracked in the distance and neighbors toasted new beginnings, I curled up on the couch of my Airbnb with a bottle of wine and my laptop. I wasn't in the mood to celebrate. But I did take inventory. Emotionally. Financially. Relationally. I looked at a spreadsheet I'd built over the past few days, every single transaction I'd made for Greg's household since the day I moved in. It was meticulous, color-coded, and built from receipts, statements, and bank records. The total? $46,812.53. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't the money that haunted me, it was the silence. The complete lack of acknowledgement. The ease with which he erased my contribution from the narrative of his life. I didn't want revenge. I wanted clarity. I wanted to remember that I had given, and I had left, and that both actions held their own kind of strength. On January 2nd, my cousin Lena, Stephanie's daughter, called me out of the blue. "I visited Uncle Greg," she said, almost in a whisper. "He's not well. Emotionally or physically? Both, I think. The house is freezing. He's bundled up in 3 layers, and the water's off. He didn't want me to come in at first. He looked ashamed. I waited. I asked him directly if you'd really been paying everything. And he finally admitted it. Said he thought it was better not to know, because knowing meant facing the truth that he couldn't survive without you." Something cracked inside me. Not pity. Not forgiveness. Just a quiet acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, he finally understood. "Did he ask you to call me?" I asked. "No." He just said. "I think I broke her." I swallowed hard. "No," I said. He didn't. On January 3rd, the mortgage company sent Greg a foreclosure notice. He'd missed the December and January payments, and now penalties were accruing. The letter, printed on stiff paper, cold and impersonal, was delivered by certified mail. He called me that afternoon. For a long time, I let it ring. When I finally answered, his voice was hollow. "It's happening, isn't it?" he said. "Yes. I don't have the money." "I know." Silence. "I thought maybe you'd come back." I didn't answer that. "I'm going to lose the house," he whispered. "The house your mother and I built. The one you grew up in." I let the weight of that settle. Then maybe you should have treated the person keeping that house alive with a little more respect. I didn't know how, he admitted. That's not an excuse, I said. That's a confession. The next morning, I visited him. Not to stay. Not to forgive. But to witness. I found him in the living room wrapped in 2 blankets, the air so cold you could see your breath. The house smelled musty, like stale air and regret. The kitchen sink was dry. The fridge was empty. His face had aged 10 years in 10 days. He looked up at me like a boy who'd been caught in a lie. I didn't know how to ask for help, he said. And when you gave it without asking, I mistook it for weakness. I sat down across from him. You called me a parasite, Greg. That word doesn't go away. I know. I worked every day. Paid your bills. Bought your prescriptions. Kept your life from collapsing. I know. And you humiliated me. For sport. He looked down at the floor. I was proud. And I didn't want to be a burden. So you made me the burden instead, I finished for him. Tears welled in his eyes, but I didn't move. Is it too late? He asked. I thought about that for a long moment. It's too late for us, I said. But it's not too late for you. He nodded. Slowly. Like someone finally accepting a sentence he'd long deserved. I'll move into senior housing, he said. Stephanie's helping me apply. They have heat. And food vouchers. I nodded. That sounds like a start. We sat in silence. 2 strangers. 1 house. 1,000 miles between us. When I left, I didn't look back. I didn't cry. I didn't second guess. Because I finally understood, letting someone face the consequences of their own pride wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. And clarity, like heat, is something you only appreciate when it's gone. After that visit, I didn't hear from Greg for a week. The foreclosure clock ticked. His utilities remained disconnected. He'd chosen to sleep on the living room couch under blankets because, he claimed, it was closer to the fireplace, a fireplace that hadn't worked properly in a decade. I knew, because I had tried to schedule a repair the previous spring, but Greg had refused, saying he didn't want strangers poking around. Now he had nothing but strangers, collections agents, city workers, utility representatives who had no emotional stake in whether he lived in that house or froze inside it. That was the cost of pride, isolation. I'd spent most of that week getting my own life in order. I moved into a downtown loft in Denver, small, modern, warm. The kind of place that felt clean and deliberate. I bought a new office chair, a good lamp, and started reorganizing my client load. By January 10th, I was back in my rhythm, consulting meetings in the mornings, financial reports in the afternoon, and hot showers at night without guilt or tension clinging to my skin. Until Beverly called. She wasn't family, strictly speaking, just Greg's next-door neighbor, a widow who had known our family for years. The kind of woman who still brought over zucchini bread in Tupperware and remembered every birthday. Emily, I don't want to overstep, she began, but your father, he doesn't look well. He's lost weight. I offered him some soup and he said he couldn't repay me and slammed the door. My gut twisted. Thank you for telling me, I said. But there's nothing I can do anymore. I know, she sighed. I just thought you should know. You deserve to decide if you want to see it for yourself. I didn't. Not yet. A few days later, I got a call from the mortgage company. A courtesy update, Greg had officially defaulted. The house would enter the foreclosure process within 30 days unless a full payment of $5,728 was received. They had tried reaching him, but he wasn't answering calls. I wasn't surprised. What did surprise me was the letter I received later that week. Not typed. Handwritten. Emily. You were right. About everything. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect you to read this. But I need to say something that I should have said the moment you stepped back into that house. Thank you. You saved me, and I was too ashamed to admit I needed saving. So instead, I punished the one person who showed up when everyone else disappeared. Your mother would be disgusted with me. I think about that every day now. I see her in you. In your patience, your drive, your silence. She was always the strong one, and you inherited every bit of her strength. I'm losing the house. But maybe I deserve to lose it. Because I didn't just lose a roof, I lost my daughter's respect. And I don't know if I'll ever get it back. But I'll try to be better. Even if no one's watching. I hope that counts for something. Greg. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it up, slid it into my desk drawer, and stared at the wall for a long time. It was the closest thing to a real apology I'd ever received from him. And still, I didn't cry. On January 21st, Greg officially moved out of the house. He didn't call me to tell me. I found out through Lena, who had helped him carry boxes into his new 1-bedroom unit at Golden Pines Senior Living Center, a subsidized complex on the edge of town. They gave him a space on the 3rd floor, she told me. It's not fancy, but it's warm. And there's a cafeteria. He even said hello to the guy next door. I pictured him there, trying to pretend he belonged, clutching a tray of overcooked lasagna and canned green beans. I didn't feel triumphant. Just still. He had made his choice on Christmas Day, and now the consequences had caught up to him. Not out of cruelty. Not from vengeance. But from math. The math that said $1,800 a month does not pay for a mortgage, utilities, medications, and food. And the daughter who quietly supplemented that math? She was gone. What I hadn't anticipated was the fallout with the extended family. Because Greg hadn't kept the truth to himself. Apparently, during one of his better days at Golden Pines, he confided in Aunt Stephanie. Told her everything. The money. The bills. My departure. The foreclosure. He didn't lie this time. And when the truth made its way through the family grapevine, the reaction was swift. Todd called to apologize for staying silent that day at the table. I should have spoken up. I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. My cousin Mason sent a simple text, "You're a better daughter than he ever deserved." And Aunt Stephanie? She sent flowers. A card that said, "I had no idea. I'm so sorry. You're always welcome at our table." Suddenly, the story had changed. I was no longer the irresponsible, freeloading daughter. I was the quiet protector who had kept her father's dignity intact until he chose to shred it on his own. Funny how quickly a narrative unravels once the truth escapes. By early February, Greg had settled into his new life. We still hadn't spoken again. But one afternoon, while checking my mail, I noticed an envelope with the return address of Golden Pines. Inside was a single photograph. It was old, a candid from the summer of 1997. Me, on the back porch in cut-off shorts, holding a garden hose, laughing while Greg stood behind me with a glass of lemonade and a sunburned nose. On the back, in thick black ink, he had written, "The last time I remember being your hero." I stared at the photo for a long time. Then I placed it back in the envelope, sealed it, and tucked it into the same drawer as his letter. Because some things are too painful to frame, but too important to throw away. The photo stayed in my drawer, untouched. I never displayed it, never showed it to friends, but I didn't throw it away either. It existed in that strange limbo, much like my relationship with Greg, buried but not forgotten, meaningful yet too painful to revisit casually. Life, for me, had moved forward. My new apartment in downtown Denver felt more like mine with each passing day. I planted a tiny herb garden on the windowsill. Bought books I actually intended to read. Met friends for brunch on Sundays. I even joined a yoga class, something I'd once rolled my eyes at. But no matter how full my days became, the silence between Greg and me remained like static behind every moment of peace. A low hum that neither disappeared nor grew louder. Just there. Until one Sunday afternoon, in early March, I received a phone call from the front desk at Golden Pines. "Miss Carter," the voice asked politely. "Your father asked us to reach out. He's been feeling unwell and has asked if you might be able to visit. No emergency. But he seemed a bit down. I thanked them and hung up without making any promises. Greg had made it clear, he wanted independence. He had wanted to be the provider, the patriarch, the one in control. Now, with no bills in my name, no financial ties, and no emotional expectations, he had exactly what he'd demanded. But I also knew depression when I heard it. And guilt when it sounded like loneliness. Still, I didn't rush over. I waited. I sat with the discomfort. I thought about the last time I had seen him in the freezing house, wrapped in those layers of regret. By Wednesday, I found myself driving across town. Golden Pines was nothing like the old family home on Juniper Lane. It smelled like lemon cleaner and weak coffee. Soft classical music piped through the common areas, where seniors shuffled about in sweatpants and slippers, some arguing about card games, others just staring into space. Greg was in room 3B, the door half open. I knocked. He turned slowly from his window. The room was small, twin bed, old television, a chair by the heater. His face looked thinner. Pale. His beard was graying more than I remembered. "Hey, Em," he said quietly. "Hey." I stepped in, unsure what to do. We weren't huggers. We barely knew how to greet each other anymore without sarcasm or shame. "I wasn't sure if you'd come," he admitted. "I wasn't sure either," I said honestly. He nodded, gesturing to the chair. "Sit, if you want." I did. There was a silence between us, the kind that only exists between people who've said too much and not enough. "I got the photo," I said finally. He smiled faintly. "That day, that was a good one. You tried to wash the patio and ended up soaking both of us." "I remember," I said. "Mom took the picture." She was laughing so hard she dropped the camera. Another silence, this one softer. "I miss her," he said. "Still. Every day." "I do too." He rubbed a hand over his face. "I think I kept pretending she was still holding things together. Even after she died. That if I just stayed out of the details, it would all somehow fix itself." I nodded. "You kept the illusion. I kept the house." He looked at me then. Really looked. "You were better than I deserved." That landed harder than I expected. "I didn't want to be better than you deserved," I said. "I just wanted to be seen. For once." He looked down at his hands, wrinkled and still. "I saw you. I just didn't want to admit what I saw." "Why?" "Because it meant I had failed. As a father. As a man. And if I admitted how much you were doing, then I'd have to face how little I had left to offer." There it was. Raw and unfiltered. Not just an apology, but the closest thing to truth Greg Carter had ever shared with me. I sat with it for a moment. "I didn't need you to offer money," I said. "I needed you to offer respect." He nodded slowly. "I know. I just didn't know how to get there. So I attacked you instead. Made it your fault." We fell into silence again. Not tense. Just tired. Eventually, he spoke. "I don't expect you to forgive me." "Good," I said. "Because I'm not ready." He smiled, a sad, almost proud little smile. "But you came." "I came because I wanted to see if you were surviving without me. And I think you're trying." Over the next few weeks, I visited Greg occasionally. We didn't talk about the house. Or the foreclosure. Or the money. We talked about my clients. His old woodworking tools. Baseball. Politics. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't repair. But it was presence. And that was something. Eventually, he showed me a journal he had started keeping. It was mostly entries about mundane things, lunch in the cafeteria, thoughts on the weather, things he overheard other residents saying. But one entry stuck out. March 3rd. "Emily came today. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She didn't forgive me. But she sat in the chair by the heater and talked to me like I was still human. I don't know what that's worth." But to me, today, it felt like everything. I took a photo of the page and saved it. Not for him. For me. By mid-March, Greg seemed to find a new rhythm. He joined a trivia club in the rec hall. Started doing morning stretches with a group of residents. Even shaved for the first time in weeks. He never asked for money. He never asked me to fix anything. And because of that, I visited again. And again. Not because he earned it. But because I chose to. By April, something had shifted between us. Not forgiveness. Not repair. But a mutual understanding, fragile, uneven, and undeniably real. We still didn't talk about Christmas Day. That moment remained frozen, like the icy house he refused to leave until it turned on him. But it lived between us, unspoken, like a burn we both remembered without needing to point at the scar. Instead, we filled our time with smaller things. Books. Old family stories. Memories of Mom. I brought him a copy of her favorite cookbook one day, rustic American dishes, dog-eared and stained. His eyes welled up when he saw the notations she'd written in the margins. She had a habit of writing too salty or Greg liked this one in the corners. He ran a weathered finger over her handwriting like it might evaporate. I forgot how much of her still lingers in the little things, he said softly. So did I replied. That day, I stayed longer than usual. We didn't talk about money. We didn't need to. He had finally learned how to live without it being mine. One afternoon in late April, I received an unexpected call from Beverly, the neighbor from Juniper Lane. I thought you should know, she said, the house was sold. I paused. To whom? A young couple. Mid-30s, I think. Pregnant. They're planning to gut the kitchen and tear out the old fireplace. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not regret. Not sadness. Just the quiet grief of letting go of a version of home that hadn't existed in years. Do they know what happened there? I asked. No, she said, then paused. But maybe that's for the best. Maybe it was. A week later, Greg called me out of the blue. I need a favor. My stomach knotted. Old instincts. What kind of favor? Not money, he said quickly. I promise. I exhaled. Okay. What is it? I'd like you to come to the community storytelling event next Friday. I signed up to speak. I think I want to say something publicly. Something I've never been able to say out loud. I hesitated. Dad. I'm not asking you to fix anything. I'm asking you to witness something. That's all. I thought about it for a full minute. Then said, okay. The event was held in the modest activity room at Golden Pines. Folding chairs, a portable mic, coffee in styrofoam cups. A few dozen residents, a couple of their children and grandkids, a sprinkling of staff. When Greg's name was called, he stood slowly, gripping a sheet of paper. He walked to the front and adjusted the mic like someone not used to being heard. Then he looked at me. Just once. And began. My name is Greg Carter, and I spent most of my life believing that being a father meant being a provider. When I lost my wife, I also lost the glue that kept my delusions intact. My daughter came home to help me after the funeral. I didn't ask. She just showed up. And I let her take over everything without ever saying thank you, because I convinced myself she owed it to me. The truth is, I owed her everything. For over a year, she paid for the roof over my head. She kept the lights on, the heat running, the food coming. She saved me from foreclosure. From ruin. And I repaid her by calling her a parasite at the Christmas dinner table. In front of our family. I humiliated the only person keeping me alive. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She just left. And the next day, I learned what true independence costs. I learned what loneliness feels like when it's earned. My daughter is not a burden. She is not weak. She is not a failure. She is the strongest person I've ever known. And this is my apology. Not because I expect forgiveness, but because shame without truth is just vanity. The room was silent. Even the usual mutterers in the back sat still. Greg stepped down slowly, sat back in his chair. He didn't look at me again. And I didn't cry. But something cracked open inside me. Not a wound. Something else. Something like peace. After the event, we didn't talk about it. I hugged him before leaving. The first real hug since before Mom died. His arms trembled slightly. I wasn't sure if it was age or emotion. But I knew I didn't need to know. Because some things, like this moment, weren't meant to be examined. Just felt. In May, I spent Mother's Day alone. It had become my tradition: coffee, a long walk, and a visit to Mom's bench by the lake. I brought her favorite flowers, yellow tulips, and sat quietly on the weathered wood. "Hey, Mom," I whispered. "You were right. About everything. He's trying. I'm healing. And we're learning how to exist without pretending." A breeze blew through the trees, soft and warm. I took that as her answer. By the end of summer, Greg had made a life for himself. He'd started teaching a budgeting class for the other residents. Just once a week, with worksheets I helped him design. He joked that it was penance. But I knew it was more. It was growth. One afternoon, he showed me a binder labeled "What I Owe," not in money, but in apologies. Letters he had written but never sent. To people he had wronged. To people who had hurt him. To himself. He handed me one labeled simply, "Emily, if you ever forgive me." I didn't open it. Not yet. Because I didn't need words anymore. I had actions. And for the first time in my life, they were enough. The truth is, healing doesn't come in grand gestures. It comes in chairs pulled close to heaters. In bitter coffee shared in quiet rooms. In letting go of the stories we were taught and writing our own, without shame, without delusion. Greg lost his house, his pride, and the version of himself he used to worship. But he found something better. Humility. Connection. Me. And I found something too. Not just peace, but clarity. The kind that comes when you stop setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Because the cost of kindness isn't the giving. It's forgetting that you get to walk away if it burns too long.